Hi everyone, I'm Emma Carmo and you're watching Breathe TV, a safe space to come to as you navigate your cancer journey. After breast cancer, people think that your cancer journey is over, that it's done. When in reality, it's just beginning and there's a whole lifetime of side effects, emotional challenges, brain fog, neuropathy, lymphedema, not to mention fear of recurrence and just kind of how it changes your entire life, your career path, and your whole body actually, because cancer cells, while the chemo is trying to kill your cancer cells, it also impacts healthy cells, right? And so giving the whole body treatment, not just during cancer, but after, is critically important. Before I start any episode, I want to try to ground the audience in your bodies. As people who are living with cancer, we are oftentimes breathing from here, we're overwhelmed, and this should be a space for you to come to exhale. And so I always do a series of mantras to help you kind of get in your body, ground your breath, and exhale as you watch Breathe TV. So again, if you're driving, don't do this. Don't close your eyes. Keep them open. Put your hands on the wheel if you are. Just keep driving. And if you're at home, in bed, on your mat, put your hand over your heart and your belly, and really feel yourself breathing. Feel your in-breath, and then follow your out-breath all the way out. In-breath, and your out-breath. One more time. In-breath, and a slow out-breath. We're going to say a few mantras to get us grounded. I am safe. I am seen. I am not alone. I am surrounded by love. I am filled with courage. I am resilient. I got this. I affirm my feelings. I can get through this. I am not alone. I will use this challenge as a gift. And my life matters. Our guest today is Michelle Ferretti. Michelle is a heart-centered healthcare professional working to put in place evidence-based solutions to affect change in terms of how patients get integrative care. Tell me what that means, because for those who are watching, you're like, that's a mouthful.
Yeah.
So what does all that mean?
So basically my role at Life with Cancer is about getting programs into people's hands to help them navigate the whole experience of cancer. So I spend a lot of time working with emotional coping and trying to teach emotional coping skills, because so many of those skills are everyday skills that it's not stuff that we learn in school, right? And it's stuff that can support us in our well-being. And doing your meditation and your mantra, like, yes, you have this lived experience of that feels better, but when we look at the physiology of what's happening in the backdrop, it's really powerful. And so what excites me is helping people feel that power in themselves, that they have some say in what's happening to them, right? Because I feel like so much of cancer is about, you need to do this, you need to do that. It's happening to you,
yes.
Right? And so how do you take on that?
When I first went through my journey, I think there's only City of Hope doing studies around survivorship and how it affected your body, mind, spirit. And I remember finding you guys, you're based in Fairfax, and going, oh my God, like, you're doing all the things that people hadn't given people like me or any patients support during their journey. What I love about your work, though, is that it's evidence-based, because people think that sometimes, this meditation, Reiki, acupuncture, it's not science, but you're doing clinical trials to study how that impacts people, right? Can you share a bit about why trials are important even around things like this? Actually more important, to show there's proof about these things are not just hokey pokey,
Right.
They actually do help your body adapt and shift and change. It can actually improve your quality of life and maybe your outcome.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a new researcher, and I wouldn't even necessarily define myself as a researcher. I see myself as a clinician that is entering into this research space because I know that research is the avenue that we can get these programs into more people's hands. And so like I said, my passion is about building up the individual to know where they have some say. And so the evidence base is really about kind of what's happening physiologically, what's happening in the background to support what we're doing and to support what somebody else is experiencing when they come to me. Like, I hear a lot of people that will say, I can't meditate, right? Because their mind is busy. Well, that's what minds do. So how do we acknowledge that that's what minds do? And then also say that we're developing a skill when we bring that mind back to something that we intend to focus on.
I hear that a lot. People say, how can you meditate for, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, half an hour, an hour? And I don't always sit there and not think.
Of course.
The art is really about going back to center.
Yeah.
So, I'm running a foundation. I love my patients. They're my friends. Travel. There's all these things happening, plus my own life. So I get on that mat and I'm like making a list in my head. I got to call this person, call that person, take the dogs out. And I go, okay, I love you. Let's go back. In breath and out breath. So it's not about being perfect in the practice. It's about knowing that you have practice and getting back to core, right? And I think this having grace with yourself, I think that's the biggest thing. Grace with your journey.
Yeah. Because I think there's one of the places that I love to explore with people is what happens to all people, right? What are our bodies doing naturally to keep us safe, to help protect us? And that sometimes those efforts to keep us safe actually bring on strong feelings that are hard to navigate. So if we can kind of be present with those feelings, if we can kind of, like you're saying, where you're noticing your list coming, right? If we can just notice that's happening and then be like, okay, and now I'm coming back, versus like, my gosh, I have all these things to do and I'm so stressed, and
or I can't meditate.
Right.
So what I do is I put I have a pad by my mat.
So you can write.
So I say, okay, hold on. Don't critique yourself. You're good. Give me some grace. And I just sit there and put a note down.
Yep.
And I write it all down. I go back and my head's clearer.
Yep.
And so I think just even grace in your practice is really important. I do think it's interesting you said something about, you mentioned how things that are meant to protect our bodies can seem harmful to us, right? After cancer treatment, my anxiety levels were out the roof. Like, I began having adrenal fatigue, a lot of anxiety, a lot of fear. And they think when you ring the bell, you're done. You're just starting your life journey.
Yeah.
And then I've seen so many people that I love going through this, some living, many dying. And then I lost my best friend to cancer at the beginning of COVID. And just all these things were happening. With my dad was sick and just all kinds of things, began having panic attacks. And I was like, oh my God. And I use all my tools, but they weren't working.
Yeah.
And I met an amazing psychiatrist who told me, she says, your body's trying to help you. It's trying to help you release the trauma that you're not able to express or even be aware of. She goes, so try to stop seeing them as I'm going to die or I'm not safe. You're quite safe. It's saying to you that it's okay to let those feelings out because they're so big that they can't contain in your body. And when she explained it that way, I was like, oh, okay. I feel bad, but it's actually helping me to release what's happening inside of me.
Yeah, there's a lot of evidence around acceptance, and it's kind of the last thing that people want to hear, right? Because it is something of like, this isn't fair, right? And there's a lot to that it's not fair, and people shouldn't have to live it. And there's a lot of anger and feelings that come with that, and sort of not a bad defensiveness, but a very understandable, like, this is hard. But when we say, yes, this is hard, and I can let it be hard, and how do I want to live while it's hard? How do I want to live while I'm living this? And I think that that's really powerful. It's not an acceptance of, yes, I'm fine with this, right? It's an acceptance of, this is here for me now. And I'm going to live this experience, whatever that looks like, and I don't have to know what that is.
We don't typically discuss anger around cancer. People want you to get past it. Okay, so
be positive.
Be positive. Hold your head up. You're a warrior. Really? No, I don't feel like a warrior right now. But they want you to, like, I hear a lot of patients saying, I gave myself X amount of time to grieve, then I was done, and I was up. And I'm like, that's not healthy. It's not fair to you. You had a whole plan. You have a life, a family. You got sick. You may be dying. You may have to lose a body part, like your kids are affected, maybe your marriage is affected, your friends, your whole life is changing as you know it. It's okay to feel something, anger, grief about it, right? To feel, to ask yourself why. And some people say, I never asked myself, ask God why. I did. It's okay to ask God why. I mean, I think if you don't ask why or don't have any time for yourself to process, that's not really healthy, So giving yourself, you said, the acceptance, to be accepting not what it is, but that you are going to feel these feelings through cancer. It does so much to help your body to calm down. I love that all your work is evidence-based, but really about coping skills, which are for cancer patients, but can help you out throughout any part of your life, right?
Yes. I kind of joke that like we do it cancer specific. I'm like, but really we all need to know these skills.
Everybody, yeah,
right.
Exactly. So you do a lot of work around cognitive and mindfulness and contemplative practices. What are those three things? How are they different and what are they?
Yeah. So cognitive practices are more about thinking about our thoughts, right? So that's sort of the classic, the evidence-based standard in a lot of managing anxiety and depression is around cognitive behavioral therapy. And that's kind of saying that our thoughts and our behaviors and our emotions are all attached. And so if we affect change in one, we can sometimes affect change in the other. And so for instance, one exercise in cognitive behavioral therapy would be to say, how do I reframe that? How do I take the experience that I had, that belief I'm going to die, right? And say, I had that pain in my head, but that doesn't mean I know I'm going to die, right? So how do we kind of shift it just a little bit? It's that idea of how do we take something and find a different way to think about it that's still true. And I think that's the tricky part, is that we often think of, I need to be super positive, right? I need to find the way that I wish I felt about this or the way I wish I thought about it. And how do we find a thought that is still genuine to us, but honors the experience that you're having? I'm still scared. And I don't know that pain I had there means that I'm going to die.
It's okay to feel that way.
Exactly.
What are your thoughts on, I'm a huge believer in that, the world we're in now, people are taught to just feel and then put everything out there on social media and talk about their feelings over and over and over. And I really believe that you can feel the feeling, but your mind is more powerful than what you feel. I think that when you tell yourself, I feel this way, feelings can be temporary and they don't have to rule your life. You could feel bad or feel not well in a moment and say, well, I feel afraid. And you tell yourself, okay, I feel afraid now, but do you say I feel afraid or I am afraid?
It's kind of on that line, but I would lean it more towards mindfulness, because what you're saying is I'm aware of this, and something that mindfulness really talks about is how do we build awareness without judgment. So I'm afraid, I feel afraid, right? Not I am, because like you're saying, that's different from your identity. Feelings are a part of every human experience, and actually feelings have an evolutionary base to them, right? They're another piece that's trying to help us navigate this complicated world. So we're never going to free ourselves from our feelings. It's what we do next, right? And mindfulness gives us that space. Or how you label it. Yeah, and what it means, because I think that our brain often jumps in and tries to create the story that matches the feeling. And so how do we let the feeling just be the feeling? And that's kind of what mindfulness says, is just noticing what's there. We don't necessarily have to change it, but interestingly, when we do just notice it, sometimes it does change. And that's sort of that temporary piece that you were just talking about, right? Is that it shifts and changes, and just by naming it, it can then go.
Right. What about, is there a practice I do called the casual observer? So when I get into my feelings, I will do mantras, meditation, all things like that. And then I'll say, okay, I'll draw a circle and I'll say, I feel this, I feel that, like little circles. And then I'll just look at the paper.
Yeah.
And I'll let myself observe that. Am I the feeling? No. I'm watching myself feel these things. And it's so powerful when I can see that feeling and say, okay, I feel this thing, but am I that? No, they're on paper, they're different things. I let myself just kind of sit with them. And amazingly enough, sometimes it can just after a while just go away,
Yeah.
So I think tools like that can really help people navigate cancer feelings, because there's so much happening.
Yeah.
Again, there's that, why is this happening to me? How am I going to manage my life, my kids, my job? Am I going to live or die? Treatment, all the data about treatment options, information, making decisions. It's a lot to handle.
Yeah.
So tell me about the other piece of this. What are your thoughts on cancer and identity? A lot of people become, once they have cancer, they'll say, hi, my name is so and so and so, and I had this kind of cancer, this stage, and that's their identity.
Yeah.
And I used to be like that because it was a huge part of my world. But I got to a point where I thought, I experienced cancer, but I'm not just a cancer survivor. I'm more than that. And I feel like people kind of sometimes tend to become this person after cancer. And I don't know if that's healthy or not. I mean, what are your thoughts on becoming that being your identity after cancer versus all the myriad of talents and gifts and other things that people are?
Yeah. So I think cancer, because it barges in the way that it does and sort of takes up space when nobody has requested its presence.
Yes,
right.
like
I think kind of
it's an unpaid guest in your house.
Exactly. And then you're paying, right? That there is sort of this pushing out of the other aspects of your identity, oftentimes in treatment, right? Because it's this effort to be kind of hyper focused on what, this really scary thing that's happening. But after, it's really about integrating back in the threads. I think of it like braiding, right? Like when we start the braid, cancer is like maybe the whole braid, if not just one piece, right? But as we continue to braid, it becomes smaller and smaller, and the other identities start to kind of weave back in. There's a beautiful program called Meaning-Centered Psychotherapy that I think does that really well with folks, in that it talks about our stories and how our stories are part of this larger trajectory. And yes, cancer entered into that trajectory, but there are many of these, because I feel like I hear from people the before cancer and after cancer me, right? And so much of the work is often kind of how do we acknowledge that there's this continuous thread? You are the same person. Yes, things shift and change. And so when your perspective can kind of see that there's this continual thread, right? That some of it comes from the family and culture that you came from, that some of it comes from roles maybe that you had, that some of it comes from things that you want to continue and move forward, that then you can kind of weave in feeling whole. Because I think cancer fragments so much.
It does. But without, whether or not people have cancer, there's always going to be change.
Yes.
And it's kind of, to your point, your earlier point about acceptance, not saying you accept what it is or you like it, but knowing that, you can redefine yourself at any part of your life. And I think people also may not think about this, but you're not changed by cancer. Whoever you are is inside of you, and your experiences make you show up as who you really are in different ways. So for example, if you are somebody who is now so bold and out there doing things, you had that capacity in you all along. You just may not have used it because you didn't have the push and that drive of cancer behind you, like pushing you out of your comfort zone. So you mentioned earlier, we're discussing all these really awesome things, but they're all part of your 4-program curriculum for cancer patients. Is it online? Is it in person? How can a patient that is watching this who wants to learn to be more mindful, more contemplative, more aware, find out about the program and access it?
The curriculum that we have at Life with Cancer is called the Integrative Psycho-Oncology Program, and that's just a bunch of fancy words to kind of say how do we kind of weave the human experience into all of this. And so the first program is Mind Over Matter, and it really is talking about some of those cognitive behavioral tools, those tools that we think about our thinking, but then layering that and using the framework of what's called acceptance and commitment therapy to soften the judgment that can sometimes come with cognitive work. So cognitive work is like, I'm not thinking the right way. And that's never, right? There's not a right way or a wrong way to think, but it's more, how do I think about my thinking so that it moves me in the direction that I want to go, so that it's connected to my values, what's important to me. And then the next class is on mindfulness, and it's called Mindfulness-Based Cancer Recovery, and that comes from Linda Carlson's work at University of Calgary. And that is really kind of taking a deeper dive into mindfulness. So in the first program, it's sort of like, how do I shift and change things? And the second one is, how do I just be a little bit more okay with what's here? And how do I spend time noticing what's here? And that can be really challenging.
When you're going through treatment, there's all these things about self-judgment. There's, did I miss something? Should I have pushed harder? Even though it was COVID, I could have done more. Or, just there's a lot of, again, emotion, guilt, fear, judgment, doubt. Is it going to work? There's people that show up for you. Some people don't show up for you at all. There's all these things. Your body changes. We have patients with breast cancer space who've lost a breast or more, in cervical who've lost, most of their their feminine parts, right? So like there's so much grieving over those things, and I feel like this kind of work, the psychology around cancer and how you talk to yourself, think about yourself, your body, is so important, because although you've gone through these challenges and these traumas, your body's working so hard for you. And just being able to be able to be safe in your body again is a big deal. Because when you have cancer, you do not feel safe in your body. And as a matter of fact, you feel like you're not in your body sometimes. So this is really grounding work. So with these interventions you're doing, are you teaching things like, EFT and tapping and other things to be able to help people cope with cancer by using tying in physical and spiritual, emotional tools?
Yeah, so we don't actually do tapping in any of
What?
them. I know.
I love
it's great.
tapping.
Tapping is great.
Do you tap?
I have learned it. I don't do it regularly. Meditation is kind of my go-to, and or movement. But so a lot of the tools in the first program feel like tools, and I think that's what makes it more accessible. In mindfulness, it really is almost kind of relieving yourself of the tools, and that's what's harder, because I think that in our typically Western view, we need to be doing something to create change. And that's sort of why we've positioned that program second in our curriculum, because this idea of just being with something is just counter to everything we understand about how we create change. And one of my mindfulness teachers kind of talked about it as self-liberation, and that just stuck with me, that a feeling can self-liberate, that an experience can self-liberate, that sometimes if we're just present with it, it shifts and moves on its own. Right? Because I've always seen myself as I need to act, I need to move, I need to change. What happens when we balance the acting with the being? And that's sort of what mindfulness is saying, is how do we be? And I think that in a world and in a society where we feel like change only happens when we do, that's a very hard thing to kind of wrap your head around.
And shift to make. So after treatment, there are days when I will just kind of sit around the house or sit in a place, and I have a whole routine planned out of self-care before I even go out to get a massage or a mani-pedi. But it's like, I'll meditate, I'll read my Bible, I will pull my cards, I will journal, I drink water, I go for a walk, I go out and do grounding, tapping. It's all about like just being in nature, being in my body, taking a bath, and I'll just lay there and relax, no stimuli, no phone, no TV, and then I'll just rest the whole day. And I find that when I have days like that, I heal so much, because what I'm doing is letting my body just be.
So there's physiology to that, which is really cool.
Tell me about that.
Yeah, so when we are in a state of fight or flight, so when we're activated, our body is addressing the short-term needs. It thinks there's something that needs to be handled, and so it's going to kind of allocate the resources in our body to handle that. But when we are in this, you kind of talked about being in this very regulated state, right? This place where you're feeling safe. Your body's like, I don't need to worry about that short-term need. I can kind of turn to the long-term needs, like my digestion, my immune function. The idea of being here, if a tiger is coming to face you, right? You don't need to digest your lunch if you're going to be lunch, right? And you don't need to worry about, am I going to be safe from disease, because you're going to be dead in 3 seconds when the tiger eats you. And so the body's trying to say, what do I need to do to protect you in this moment? And so when you put yourself in that regulated state, you are actually activating the parts of your nervous system that build immune system and well-being.
And I'm a big fan of therapy. I see a therapist on a regular basis, but I find that the tools that I've learned make me don't have to see her as much.
Yes.
And she said to me at some point, I don't need to have to see you all the time. Before I was seeing her once a week, then every 2 weeks, and now it's like maybe once a month. And when I have a pinch, I see her if I need to, but she said my job's to get to put me out of a job.
Exactly.
I don't want to see you here in 5 years or 10 years. Now, it was the most terrifying thing being in treatment and then forgetting something. And then I make a note on a pad, make a note about the other note, make a note about that note.
Yeah.
Same note over and over and over. I would forget stuff. And a lot of patients are terrified of brain fog. Yeah. But the worst part about it for me is it's not gone away.
Yep.
So I've learned to manage that by making notes on my phone, computer reminders, and of course I have a ton of notepads. But for somebody who is going through brain fog now in treatment, it's a lot more, aggressive and present. You did a study, right, on brain fog. Can you share about what you learned in the study?
So right now we're working on a study that's looking at measurements for brain fog, because one of the challenges with brain fog is that people share that this is happening for them and they're experiencing it. They go and get a full neuropsychological workup and it doesn't show it. And the idea is that it's kind of this deficit model, right? That kind of there's this line of what we deem functional and non-functional, and that brain fog doesn't actually bring people below that line. But back to our conversation about identity, it isn't how somebody's used to navigating in their world. It's not how they know themselves to be. And in that way, it's really distressing. So we need better tools to be able to measure brain fog so that we are able to validate the experiences that people are having, because the literature shows that up to 75% of women managing breast cancer in treatment experience brain fog, and up to 35% of them continue to experience brain fog after.
Because it affects your work.
It affects everything.
So, yeah, especially if you're, I mean, we all work, right? Mm-hmm. And so before cancer, I worked in government contracting, managing large proposal and contracts. And my job was like compliance, meaning I had to understand every single part of that RFP in a lot of detail.
All the details.
Had tons of meetings. I had teams of sometimes over 150 people I would be managing on a proposal or a project. And so when I began to have the brain fog, it terrified me. Mm-hmm. It's one thing to have it happen at home, but to be on a call and you forget what you're saying, or to be able to read a piece of paper and then go back and read it again and again and again, and you can't retain it. It's such a difficult thing to balance. Mm-hmm. How do you accept that? I mean, I'm all about meditation, mindfulness, but how do you deal with that, especially in the workplace? And because it's you're losing maybe a breast, right, or an ovary, or ovaries rather, or you're losing your hair, your eyelashes. Those things are hard enough, but your mind.
So your mind, your brain is how you know yourself to be, right? And so the challenge about it is it changes quickly, but there's no quick fix. But the good news is the mindfulness and all this stuff, again, one nervous system, right? All the things that you're doing to regulate that nervous system is also going to help your cognitive function. Because back to that fight or flight, when we are in a state of fight or flight, our body doesn't think that complex thinking is needed. There's nothing complex about that tiger facing you, right? And so it puts that off. And so when we are in that more regulated state, that's when we're able to access our best thinking. And
let me ask you, is the brain fog a result? I have two questions. One, is the brain fog a result of your chemotherapy treatment, or is it a result of the trauma of cancer?
They don't know. I think that early on the assumption was it was chemotherapy, and that's where the base of the research was. And now there's research that's showing that people that have not had chemotherapy do experience brain fog. And there's some questions about the role of hormones in brain fog. And right, when we have so many cancer treatments that are affecting hormones, there's the role of estrogen. There is a role of estrogen in our cognitive process. And so because the process in the brain is so complex and so many things influence our nervous system, it's almost next to impossible to pull out the direct cause. Chemotherapy is definitely a component, but it is not the only component. And that's why and Life with Cancer does too, we move more towards the language of brain fog instead of chemo brain, because chemo brain, people will not see themselves in that if they haven't had chemotherapy, and they can continue to feel that this is not connected, like what's wrong with me, right? It's not connected to my cancer experience. Yeah. And so using the term brain fog kind of gives a little bit bigger window for that, so that we're encompassing all the people that are navigating this, so that hopefully we can continue to get resources.
Yeah, I asked because as a patient, I experienced brain fog, and many who are watching experience brain fog during treatment. Mm-hmm. But I always think, I look back and I think now, and I thought then, is it because of all the information, the overload? I would be sitting in my doctor's office, sitting there, they'd be talking to me, and I would be like, I wouldn't hear a thing. I would just be like, I would be someplace else. Yeah. And so I thought, is this overwhelm or is it the treatment? But that happened. I'm 17 years past now. But I lost my dad almost 2 years ago, year and a half now. And I swear, I thought I was getting dementia. I would literally get dressed and put my shirt over my other shirt. I go outside and forget what I went outside for. I would lose my keys. Mm-hmm. I would forget everything. And so I went to see a doctor, and I was like, I was really scared because I was forgetting everything. And he said, well, what's going on in your life? Are you in treatment for something? Or he asked me all these questions, and I said, I lost my dad recently. And he said, this is grief. I think it's important to reframe how we talk about these things, because, when you're, to your earlier point, not aware of the words you're using, when you're not aware of how you're talking to yourself, it can make the thing seem scarier when the thing really trying to protect you, right? Mm-hmm. So when you're overwhelmed, your body's saying, you're focusing on, like, to your point, flight or fight. So all your emotions are going towards getting through cancer and out. when someone you love is in transition or dying. You're focusing on your body's overwhelmed. You shut down. And so when you think about it as more of like, I accept, well, my feelings are not the best, but it is what it is. And you accept how you feel and give yourself grace. It can take away the fear of you thinking, I'm losing my mind,
Yes.
or, you know, why am I so anxious? Or why am I depressed? Because those things are things that do happen when you're losing part of who you are, physically and or emotionally.
Yeah.
Tell me more about the brain fog results from the study.
So my thoughts on kind of emotions affecting cognitions and many other things, I think that's something that we are learning more and more about. And that's one of the spaces that I try and have conversations with our medical team, because again, we're all one nervous system. And when you're in that heightened emotional state, it's really hard to think. So doctors will often say, I told them that. And how do they not know? And it's like, because when we're afraid, we don't actually hear the same way. Our ears are listening for more vibrational low tones, and speech is happening at a higher tone.
Interesting.
And so we're not actually hearing what's happening. And that's why we'll always say, bring somebody with you. When somebody's talking about you, it's really hard to really hear what they're saying. And so kind of moving from that to the brain fog study, we don't actually have any results yet. We are halfway through our recruitment, much to the help of Tigerlily. Actually, our first participant was from Tigerlily, which is amazing, because one of our primary efforts is to recruit a diverse sample. Because in so much clinical research, right, the accessible population is a white population. And we know that brain fog is not just happening for people who are white and Caucasian. And so we're really trying to match the diversity that we have in the area that we're serving.
And to your point, you know, people who are facing disparities are dealing with so many different determinants of health that impact their lives. So there is the cancer, but then there is maybe single parenting, multiple kids, traveling to cancer centers. There are all these things that are impacting them at a macro level.
Right.
Then you add cancer. How much can you hear?
Right.
And so I think it gives people the insight of like that, you know, when you engage people, it's really not only about engaging them and telling them, it's understanding their entire life and where they're coming from, what they're dealing with, because they're coming to see you, but they're bringing their whole life with them.
Right.
Their lived experience, their trauma, their fears. Their kids who were home alone without getting their homework done because you're at this this center getting your trial or treatment. So like, it gives you a more holistic picture of the individual and what their needs are, and then you can tailor the way you talk with them on a different level or address them different ways.
Right.
You mentioned modulation of the voice as well. I mean, so as part of the goal is to help inform physicians on how to better talk to people, because when you're talking like this versus, hey, you know, that's a different level of energy.
Yeah, absolutely. I spent a lot of time talking with other colleagues in the social work realm. I haven't really had the opportunity to talk to physicians that way. But yes, the prosody of our voice. So how the intonation, the rise and fall, is another way that our body understands safety. And so when we come in very loud, or if we're activated ourselves, our nervous system kind of picks up on that, and we'll come into a more defensive space.
Yeah, you're doing such great work. You know, I know that people who are watching, are feeling relief, and knowing that you're not alone in this, and whatever you're feeling or thinking, it's okay to feel that way. This experience of cancer is not a wanted guest in any of our homes, but it's there sometimes. Thinking about how you talk to yourself about what you're feeling, allowing yourself space to feel, and knowing that it's okay to process those feelings. Learning how to label how you feel is important, and that's critical as well. And then learning to observe your thoughts and let them come and let them go. I would say give yourself grace, you know, give yourself love and compassion. One thing I do a lot when I'm being hard on myself is give myself a hug. I just hug myself and I just say, it's okay, it's okay, it's okay. And I go like this, you're okay, you know? So learning how to love yourself through things is really so important, and is so vital, because the journey can be hard, the journey can be long, and it can change your life, but really it's how you love yourself through any journey that matters. And so thanks for being with us today on Breathe TV. Michelle, you've been such a really plethora of resources. Can you tell the guests how they can find out more about Life with Cancer and all your amazing programs?
Sure. Life with Cancer is easily found on the internet at www.lifewithcancer.org. And there you can see all of the different resources that are available, from education to a variety of different types of support, fitness, all sorts of things. So come check it out.
Awesome sauce. Well, thanks for being here. You were amazing. And thanks for all of the good work you do.
Thanks so much for having
me. We need you. Yes.
Thank you.
Everyone, thanks for watching. Hope you leave this episode more mindful, more motivated, and more in tune with how you talk, think to, and treat yourself. Until next time, live your best life, love your life, and love those around you. I am your host, May McCarmel, and this is Breathe TV.